welcome. It's Monday. Hey, thank you for tuning in to the JOURNEYS Webcast. I'm Allan, Karl, your host, and very excited to have another special guest. This is the 26th episode of the JOURNEYS Webcast, something that started off as a whim back in April when we first were locked down here in San Diego in the United States. And I'm blessed to have had so many great guests, and today is super special. But I wanted to check in with everybody. You know, we here in the U.S. had just went through a holiday weekend. It's not necessarily the first holiday, of course, while it being challenged by this pandemic, but it's a holiday most of the time we spend with extended family. And I know there have been a lot of challenges in that, and not all of us could have had that opportunity. And so, you know, it's understood that some people may be feeling, a little down. Well, today's webcast, I think, is going to get you to cheer up. But I just hope that you're doing okay. And if you're not, definitely express yourself, talk to people. It's amazing what we can do these days with technology. So anyway, Phil Palmer, let me just tell you a little bit about Phil. He hails from England, London, actually. He's known world over, as you know, and I know you've heard songs that he's played on. He's a session guitarist, producer, and a musical director. His career has spanned over 50 years. You can hear Phil and his legendary guitar playing and tone, on more than 5,000 songs, 500 albums, and over 50 #1 hit singles worldwide. He has famously collaborated with some of the most prominent artists in the music business, including Paul McCartney, David Bowie, Frank Zappa, and so many more. We'll be talking about them today. He is also sought after as a touring musician, where he played guitar for the biggest and best bands of a generation, including Eric Clapton, Dire Straits, Tina Turner, and with Pete Townsend and George Michael, and it goes on. He served Phil as musical director, and performed with the Strat Pack. I love this. It's a collection of some of the best guitarists in the world. They got together for a celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Fender Stratocaster. It was a concert at Wembley Arena in London back in 2004. And then, if that's not good enough, he performed at the infamous Party at the Palace as a member of the house band for the Queen's 50th anniversary rock concert right there at Buckingham Palace. He grew up in the shadows and influence of rock and roll pioneers with his famous uncles, Ray and Dave Davies of the Kinks. Yeah, can you imagine? He is married to Italian singer and television personality Emanuela Palmer, more popularly known in Italy as Numa. Together, they collaborate and are involved in several humanitarian projects, including UNICEF and others. Hey, Phil, come on into the room. Say hello. We are so excited to chat with you today.
Okay, press both the buttons. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Splendid.
This is so funny. Hey, I just want to, we've had some people in. We've got Barbara Oriana Condor, or Bo. She's from Romania, I guess, but via Italy right now. She tuned in. She helped. She introduced us.
I know Bo well. She's crazy. We love her. She asks us some great questions. She brings along some great ideas.
Oh, this is great. And Bill Gertine from the Chicago area. He's an old speaker friend of mine. I did a lot of that. We have Juan from Chicago, shouting out to Karen in Muskoka, Ontario, Canada. Welcome. Sora Lopez is tuning in from Bari, Italy. And says hello. Angie, nice to see you.
Familiar names there. Because we do a similar thing called Casa Palma, which we've been doing all through the lockdown, which has been a lot of fun. And we've made some great friends, which we're staying in contact with, including Bo.
Oh, that's awesome. Casa Parma. Sounds good. Speaking of lockdown pandemic, what's happening in Italy? What's the scene like there for you and for your neighbors?
The first time around, it was a bit grim, because there was 10 weeks where we couldn't really go out. And the police were being pretty strict. I tried to go out on my bicycle one morning and they'd sent me home. But gradually, as we got used to it, after about, I guess, 6 weeks. The Rome government, the Rome councils sent out a little form which we could fill in so we could actually go out and do stuff.
Like a permission slip or something.
It's exactly what it was, yeah. And so I was able to go to my local studio and record some of the songs that I've been writing during the lockdown. And I did some sessions remotely for Trevor Horn in London for the new Rod Stewart album.
Oh, wow.
So that was great because it allowed me to sort of integrate with the world again after being stuck in here for all that time. It was nice.
Yeah, let's chat a little bit about that because as a not only a legendary session musician, you've played with everybody. You've also toured extensively, and I know this time when concerts are pretty much non-existent, and thanks for technology, there's at least some collaboration. But there's platforms like streaming like this. But musicians. Now, of course, the big ones, the ones with big names, with many millions of albums sold, probably are doing okay. But it's those small guys who are, really touring bands, and that's where their bread and butter comes from. Are you talking to your colleagues? Like, how are people dealing with this?
Everyone's dealing with it. I mean, because we don't have any choice. We've got to. It's the same for restaurant owners too. It's a very difficult time. I've been fortunate because I've been able to continue to work. And I put a little note on my webpage inviting people to contact me if they wanted to do anything. And I started to give lessons, which is something that I've never done before. That's become quite an interesting source of income for me over the last... Yeah. I've got 4 or 5 regular guys. There's 2 in America and the rest around Europe. And, I've actually really enjoyed passing on some of the information that I've picked up over the last 50, 60 years.
Yeah, so lessons. Okay, so obviously you just saw me do a riff, and you know that I need a lesson right there. Do you recognize the riff at all?
No, I didn't recognize it.
No, it's a hack at the core. Which is one of Eric Clapton's songs from I think Slow Hand. So it's an older one, but anyway, yeah.
It's a better attempt anyway.
It was it was very brave to do that in front of you. That's for me anyway. For me. Hey, I know you've got these 2 legendary uncles, right? Ray and Dave Davies. Arguably, you could even say these guys are responsible for creating punk rock or heavy metal. Just incredible back in the very early 60s. So obviously in the shadows of these guys, you get a little inspiration, you feel a little that energy. But how did you get from who gave you your first guitar, and how did you go from that first guitar to playing in 5,000 songs?
Yeah, it was Dave. It was Dave Davis. I was about 8 years old. They were already starting to play around London with a band called the Ravens. They were called the Ravens at first.
Okay.
And I got very interested. I was already playing because I started playing ukulele when I was very small, about 5 years old, because my hands were small, so I couldn't really get my fingers around a full-size guitar until I was about 8 or 9. And then Dave started collecting all these fabulous instruments. And I used to go and hang out with him and to try them out, and fabulous Gibsons and Les Pauls and Stratocasters and all these wonderful things. And I used to just really love hanging out with him. And it was during one of these afternoons around at my grandmother's house where he was fiddling around with a little amplifier, which he loved the sound of. It was distorted. And it's before anybody had figured out that distortion was a good thing. And if only it had been louder, it was a little kind of gramophone, a little cassette player or something like that. And he plugged the guitar into it and played this. And it sounded amazing. And he said, listen, I want this to be louder. And so he got a soldering iron out and a piece of wire with a jack plug on the end, and he soldered this piece of wire onto the back of this little device and plugged it into an AC30, and he invented the preamp. Because nobody had really done it before then. And the sound for You Really Got Me was born.
From just a little quick hack wiring job.
Yeah, and he really started something big at that point, because distorted guitars were not really the thing at that time. This is, people like Chet Atkins around and Hank Marvin. They were getting a nice clean sound with their instruments, but to actually deliberately make it distorted was quite a breakthrough.
Huh. Hey, Karen from Canada is saying it's hard to hear you, but is anybody else having any problem? Because I'm hearing him fine. I just want to make sure that you guys can hear Phil. So
should I get closer to the mic? Is that better?
Yeah, maybe that'll be better. Yeah.
Okay, I might have to hold it.
Oh, we don't want to do that for you, but
that's okay.
Okay. So from these guys, okay. Chris says he's coming through fine, but okay, cool. So we're good. So these guys invented the preamp and distorted, and of course, You Really Got Me, which one of the greatest hits, and we lost Eddie Van Halen last time, who gave that song a second life to a whole new generation. Yeah. And so how did you get? Okay, so Dave gave you the guitar, and
he gave me my first electric guitar, which was a Vox Phantom. It's shaped like I think it was 5-sided, like a 50-pence piece. Strange shaped thing made by Vox, which I loved it. And then I went on and I bought myself a Harmony as well. So I had 2 electric guitars by the time I was about 10. And I just went on from there. I watched them, going up and down the motorway in their old Thames van and collecting messages on their van in lipstick from the fans, and I thought, what? This just looks fascinating. And went to see them a few times locally, and I was really just hooked on rock and roll. I loved what it was doing, and it was the start of a revolution, as you know, in the early 60s, when I was about, I was born in 52, so yeah, by 64, when the Kinks were starting to be successful, I was 12.
Mm-hmm. And when did you do your first? How did that come about? Like how old were you when you did your first gig? And was it live or was it in the studio?
No, it was live at the local youth club. I was about 14, I guess, 15 maybe. And I had a lot of encouragement from my first girlfriend, who kind of forced me into playing. And we did our first gig at the local youth club in a place called Hendon.
Mm-hmm.
And we earned, I think, about £8 or something, which we split between us.
That was a big haul that day, huh?
It was.
And but hey, at 14 or whatever it was, it's that must have inspired. What were your parents thinking at the time?
That's a good question, because my dad was a policeman, and he was well aware of the associated things going on inside rock and roll, and was very anxious that I didn't get involved in all that. And so he was a little bit anti. In fact, he became extremely anti a bit later on, when I was about 17 or 18. And we had a confrontation on the doorstep of my parents' house when I came in at 6:30 in the morning from a gig. And he was just going to work, and we sort of came face to face, and he said, "Listen, this ain't going to work." He said, "Listen, you either get a proper job or you find somewhere somewhere else to live, and I went from that moment. I stayed with my girlfriend for about 4 years.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
So that was the turning point.
Yeah.
How about the first session? What was that like, and how'd that?
That was fun. That was around. Let's see. I was about 18, I guess. Uncle Ray decided that he wanted to start a recording studio and a small label, which became known as Conch. And Conch Records, the studio is still there and still functioning, but Conch Records lasted about 5-6 years. And they had a few artists, and the first person that they signed to the label was a girl from County Durham called Claire Hamill.
Mm-hmm.
And she'd made an album previously, and she was in the studio making a new album with Uncle Ray producing. And I used to just hang out at the studio and sit at the back and watch it happen. I was fascinated by the process of people kind of starting with an idea and making a piece of music out of it. And involved in that session were a couple of well-known guys. Phil Chen was the bass player, who went on to do lots of other stuff. But he was already an established session player at that point. And a drummer called Clem Catini, who played on You Really Got Me, I think. And someone else, I can't remember. But I used to sit at the back of the control room and just watch it all happening. One evening, they went out to dinner, and I was noodling away in the studio on... Ray had a beautiful sunburst Telecaster with the white bead around the edge. I used to love playing it. And I was noodling around in the studio on that. And I didn't know, but Claire had come back from dinner and was in the control room listening to me play. And she said, she came out to the studio, she said, "That's nice. Can you play on my next tune?" And I said, "Yeah, it'd be a pleasure." And it started right there. That was my first session.
Wow.
And it went on from there. It was an evolution from that point. But I spoke to Phil Chen after that. He gave me some pointers. He gave me some ideas and said, "You really should think about learning to read music," which I never did.
Mm-hmm.
And there we are. And one thing led to another, and it's exactly how it worked back in those days.
Huh. Interesting. That's a great story. Just a matter of fact, these guys left, you're noodling in the room and somebody hears you and bam. Yeah. Well, it was an evolution from there. And I'd like to go ahead and play a short video and then we'll talk about it on the backside. So we'll turn our microphones off and check out this. This is absolutely outstanding.
Allan.
Yeah, I told you that was going to happen, didn't I?
You did, yeah. You warned me about that.
I told you that was going to happen. Wow, that is just so inspiring. I love that reel. You've played with obviously, on a huge tour with Eric. Then after that, you joined one of the biggest bands in the world, the Dire Straits, and you've toured with. You probably played for hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of people. I heard this story about you about the difference between preparing to tour with the Mark Knopfler Dire Straits and that of Eric. What can you say about the stylistic differences between these two guys?
Okay, it's a good question. They're vastly different. I mean, they're both wonderful players. Don't get me wrong. But it's their approach to what they do is what's so different between the two of them. To put it quickly, we did 3 days rehearsal for Eric's tour. 3 days.
3 days.
And then we kind of launched into it. It was still a bit rough and ready, but the band was so good that we could kind of, after a few gigs, everybody was reading each other's minds, basically. The difference between that and the Straits, Mark decided that he needed 3 months rehearsal for that. And, that's just, it's a long time. It's a long time to be rehearsing anything. But I must admit that after a few days, it made sense because the difference of the Dire Straits and Eric is the dynamics of the band. Okay, so there's 9 people in Dire Straits, and the dynamics inside the band go up and down, and the tempos change, and they move around, and the stories of the songs kind of evolve. Telegraph Road and Private Investigation, they're little stories, and they need that kind of drama. Mm-hmm. And that's what takes the time to rehearse, to get 9 people to understand when to slow down and when to get quieter and when to get bigger again. That's the tough bit. And that's what took so long. Apart from anything else, the other difference between Eric and Mark is that Eric is, when he's playing solos, he's not really thinking about what he's going to play. It comes straight from here and goes down his left arm, basically. And it never goes up there. And consequently, he's able to have an endless sort of expression. It just keeps going. And some of Eric's solos were unfixed. We would never know how long they would last. And you could usually count them in minutes rather than bars. But Mark, because of his stuff that he did in the studio, for example, Sultans of Swing and all the great licks that he put on the original, they had to be included. Otherwise the fans would not like it. So he had to figure out a way of being kind of spontaneous and enjoying himself, but include the important bits from the original records. And that was, I think, something that he found challenging. Because if you're in a flow playing a solo and you have to suddenly at some point you have to remember to play something else. It's got to break the flow, and that's what Mark struggled with, and I think that's why he needed so long. I really admire him for that because it's a tough one. If to be free and to just play, what's coming out of here is a different story. It's you don't think about it, but Mark had to play the important lines, so that's the difference.
Yeah, so that when we think of a grand tour now, so many big names have fixed set lists that vary very rarely from night to night, and I imagine in those kinds of cases that don't have spaces where there's improvisation. How do you stay challenged and how do you stay excited about that?
It was different for me. I used to, obviously being in a band with Mark Knopfler at the front, I had my role was predictable, shall we say. I obviously I could never get in the way. It was different with Eric because Eric used to encourage me to get in the way sometimes. He would, delegate suddenly in the middle of a tune, so suddenly say, okay, do something now. And it was a lot more fun in that respect, and a little bit more challenging. But with Dire Straits, even after 3 months of rehearsal, I was really looking forward to getting to the first gigs, just to feel an audience and get some kind of feedback from an audience. And I wasn't disappointed. It was a remarkable experience.
There's an interesting Eric Clapton toured and played on an album with Roger Waters, Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking, in the late '80s. And if you Roger Waters, Pink Floyd, their shows are it's more than just music. It's an enveloping experience. But because there's so many video, movies they're showing, there's so many effects, there's things going on. When Eric Clapton was touring, he had to play with headphones to a click track. And I remember seeing an interview years ago where he said that was the most challenging. Did he ever talk to you about working with Roger and that tour?
I'm not that I can repeat.
Okay.
Nothing. I know he didn't really enjoy it that much. But no, that was just Eric. I mean, it's still Eric, really. I mean, we did some orchestral things with Eric, and it was the same kind of problem for him. He found it really challenging because it was restricted him from just being free.
Yeah.
And we did something called the Guitar Concerto with Eric at the Albert Hall, and he didn't like it. He didn't enjoy it because he knew that there was a 60-piece orchestra all playing the parts, and he had to stay in the right place, otherwise it was a train wreck, and sometimes it was. In fact, there's a story that goes with the first time we played the Guitar Concerto at the Albert Hall. The afternoon of the gig, we'd been rehearsing, and we hadn't got through from the beginning to the end without some kind of problem. And there was a talk about perhaps dropping it, not doing it that night. And
wow.
I remember Ferroni standing up. He said, "Stop, you guys." He's talking to the orchestra. "You guys, stop looking at that guy waving the stick. Listen to me, because I'm the drummer, and follow me. Don't follow him." And just as he said that, the stage mannequin running on the stage said, "They're opening the doors. We've got to get off." So, and they were still, as we went off, they were still deciding whether if we should play the Guitar Concerto or not. But we went for it, and there was a sort of change within the attitude of the orchestra. They were looking and listening to Steve Ferroni, the drummer. And it suddenly all clicked, and we got through it for the first time in front of an audience. The first time we actually completed it.
That's right.
It was a wonderful moment.
Yeah, stop looking at the guy waving with the stick. I love that. So good. Hey, Bo is asking, a good question. Actually, I was going to bring something like this up, but she says, you've worked with so many artists. Which one was more demanding in the recording studio or one during a live concert than you? Because you're quite demanding, I guess. She said.
I was demanding of myself, yeah.
Yeah.
Mark we went through a funny moment with Mark before the tour, because he asked me to come along to the studio when they were recording the album on Every Street. And Jeff Beccaro was there, and I thought, oh my God, it's Jeff Beccaro. And they were playing a track called Planet of New Orleans, I think, and I sort of joined in on that one. And then the next day, Mark said, "Come in and I want you to try something out with you." And to be fair, I would never have been there in the first place if he didn't know I could play. Let's put it that way. So it wasn't an audition. It was more a case of to see if I could be precise and take orders and not get bored, I think. So he had me playing. He had all these Stratocasters spread around the room. I had 4 or 5 that I brought with me, and there was another 9 or 10, all strung up and all ready, all around the room in the control room at Air Studios. And I thought, what's going on here? And he said, "Okay, I want you to play this part." And we worked out this little arpeggio thing on all of those guitars. Right? And I said, "Okay." no, whatever. And so we went through this process, and some of them were more difficult to play than others, and some sounded slightly different to others, but they were all Stratocasters of various types. And we got through all 16 guitars, and the engineer's scratching his head and wondering what the hell's going on. And he said, okay, let's start listening back to them. So they recorded them all separately. And he said, okay, which one do you prefer? And I said, I have no idea. And they all sound the same to me. And he said, yeah, it's funny that, isn't it? And he turned to the engineer. He said, you decide. I'm going home. And that was the end of the day. But I think that was Mark's way of making sure that I could follow the instructions.
Interesting. That is a wild story. Yeah. Okay. Let the engineer decide. Hey, speaking of that, I got another video I'd like to play, so we can actually see you with Mark and Eric. So we'll talk about this on the other side. Okay. I'm going to turn the mic off too, and I'll remember next time to.
Okay.
give me an overdose. Just a little lazy love. 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 Ever since I was a young boy, I played the silver ball. From Soho down to Brighton, I must have played them all. But I ain't seen nothing like you in any amusement hall that kept on like this. So I played
Man, no matter, I've done 26 of these, Phil. Hey, wow.
Yeah, man,
Hey, if you've just tuned in, I'm Allan Karl. This is the JOURNEYS Webcast. My guest is Phil Palmer, legendary guitar player, session musician, and live touring hired gun. Wow. That Pete Townsend, jeez, he is just something else, huh?
There's no one quite like Pete. I love Pete Townsend. He's just so he's potty. He's potty. Do you know the expression potty? He's a little bit nuts, but he's just so much fun. So much fun to work with. I love him.
Yeah, and that little selection of clips shows a little bit of the versatility of the guitar, the compositions, and the dynamics, particularly in the Dire Straits segments.
That was a good example of the dynamics right there.
Yeah,
And that got almost acoustic on some nights when Mark and I used to look at each other. I used to go, I bet I can play lighter than you can. And it was a great competition and a lot of fun.
yeah. Was that Calling Elvis at the beginning there, or was that the Every Street, I guess?
I can't remember.
Yeah.
Calling Elvis.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things with a Mark, I can't ever remember seeing Mark use a pick. And I know in a lot of the work you're similar with Mark, but of course in some of those clips we showed, you are using a pick. But Mark is very particular about the sound. How do you take approach to, playing a wailing lead without a pick versus flat picking with a hard, or whatever your style of pick is?
That's a good question, actually, Alan. I mean, I think gradually I've weaned myself off of the plectrum. I used to use it a lot more than I do now, and it was pretty much, if I had to play something a bit quick, a bit fast, a long line of notes quickly together, then I would use a pick. But now I've developed a technique where I don't have to use a plectrum to do that. And a lot of it comes from the left hand, which is a hammer-on technique, which is a lot of country pickers use it.
Yep.
Give it a quick example, but something like this. It's a lot to do with the left hand.
The hammering, huh?
Yeah, that kind of takes the place of the plectrum for me, and we do it, I think, with the Dire Straits Legacy, which is all the Dire Straits catalogue. I can do that whole set, that whole show, which is 2 hours and 20 minutes, without needing to use a plectrum. And There's something about the fingers that gives you a bit more sensitivity, a lot more sensitivity actually, which you don't get from a plectrum, and that's what I really enjoy these days.
Yeah, and you mentioned Chet Atkins. Of course, there's a legendary. I mean, Mark did an album with Chet called Neck and Neck, and I had the opportunity to see Chet Atkins live once, play in a little club, tiny club here in Southern California.
Wow,
And one of the
amazing.
things, yeah, one of the things I always, he would come out. He's like, okay, I'm going to do the melody. I'm going to do 2 different melodies on 6 strings. And what he could do with that guitar, and without a pick again, was just absolutely crazy.
But that's really where Mark's technique came from, and a lot of other people, including me. My early inspirations were the same as his. So I was already a finger picker before Dire Straits, and it was a type of music that I enjoyed. And I used to watch Scotty Moore was another finger picker, great finger picker. And a guy called Roy Buchanan. And
Roy Buchanan.
It was nuts what he could do with a Telecaster.
Talk about a Telecaster, exactly. I did see him live a couple times as well. I was fortunate, and what a sad ending to his life. But yeah,
he was a marvelous player, and I got a lot of inspiration from that. Aside from another sort of momentous occasion, when I was probably about 20, when Uncle Dave came back from America with a bunch of guitars that he'd found in various junk stores around. One was an original Flying V, Gibson Flying V, which was just the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. And the other was a very beaten up 1951 Nocaster. And that's in between the Broadcaster and the Telecaster.
a Nocaster.
Yeah, it's a rare beast, and to be honest with you, nobody knew what it was back then. It looked like a Telecaster, but didn't have a name on the headstock. And it turns out there was an interesting story that went with that. And around 1950, Fender had been making the Broadcaster since 1948, and it was the first kind of full production electric guitar available. And they were doing okay, but at the same time, Gretsch Drums had a kit called a Broadcaster kit, and they went to court in 1951, in about April of 1951, and Gretsch won the case, and Fender had to think of a new name for their guitar, and it started to call it the Telecaster at that point.
Huh.
But there was a space of 3 months when they were going through this court case where they were making guitars but didn't put a name on them. And so it's in between the Broadcaster and the Telecaster, and it's this guitar that Dave brought back was one of those. And it cost him $150 in a junk store somewhere. and he said, this needs a bit of work on it. Do you want to have it and fix it up and you can use it? And I said, yeah. So I did, and it became my main guitar for all of my playing years, right through the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
Wow!
And it was my main session guitar, which I used for all that period. And I learned so much from the guitar itself, including a lot of the tricks that I'd seen Roy Buchanan do, bending under the top nut and stuff like that. Harmonics and stuff. I thought, yeah, this is great. So that sort of led me in the direction of being a country picker, having that guitar.
Having that country. Hey, I'm going to switch over to the chat a bit. A couple of people have asked some questions. Sora wants to know which artist you collaborated with is in closest to your ideas, your style, maybe.
No, it's a hard one to answer that. I mean, one of the things about being a session player is you have to be able to do everything. And the first probably 10 years of doing sessions, I did everything. Nothing in particular better than anything else, but that's part of the job. You know, you walk into a room full of strangers and they ask you to create something in front of them. And so it's quite a high pressure thing, although you get good at it. You know, you get good at reading people and you start to understand what they want fairly quickly. You develop a sense of humor with the client, and after that, the music kind of takes care of itself. And back in the day, back at early days of sessions, I could do 3 different sessions in 3 different studios for 3 different artists every day. And I carried 6 guitars in my car. I had a station wagon. I would carry 6 guitars, a couple of amps, and various bits and pieces, just in case something came up that I needed a guitar for. And you know, I didn't. I suppose the Telecaster or the Nocaster was, you know, always one of those, and it usually was the one I ended up using.
Wande, who says, by the way, he met you a couple years ago. He says that it should be noted that on that lead that when Eric says "take it away, Phil," I guess he says that Eric had broken a string, so that lead was not rehearsed or anything. Is that true? Do you remember that?
It is true. I mean, it's a 12 bar. You know, it's not rocket science.
Right, exactly. It's the blues. Yeah.
The thing that was stressful about that moment, it was slightly stressful. It wasn't the 120,000 people or the live DVD or anything. It was Mark Knopfler and Eric standing on the side of the stage watching me do it. That was the stressful moment.
That's the moment.
Because as Eric went off to change his guitar, and I looked over, and he was standing talking to Mark Knopfler, who was ready to come on in a few minutes' time. You know, that was a little bit weird. Oh,
yeah, you're maybe the connection thing.
Could be. I hope it comes back in a second.
Yeah. Well, I will. Bill Gertine, or no, Brian Hamilton rather. Okay, Bill. Brian says in that all along the Watchtower, and I asked you this actually yesterday talking. He wants to know if that was Tony Levin, which on that, and I know there's a story between that recording and that group there, because it's not only Tony, right?
No, it's Tony Levin for sure. It is Steve Ferroni on the drums, and the singer is Paul Carrack, who's I think the best soul singer that England have ever produced. Can you still hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. Yep,
Okay,
just can't see you, but you'll get connected again.
I hope so. I don't know if I should try and do something here.
You know what you could do is just I'll turn you off and then go back to that link again and get back into the room. I bet you that would reconnect you. You want to try that?
I can. I'm back.
Oh, you're there. Good. See, just talking about it. So Tony Levin, Paul Carrack, who also, by the way, toured with Roger Waters and helped sing a lot of those songs. I didn't realize that was Paul.
And he's been touring with Eric for the last 5 years or something as well. He's taken over there as well.
Wow.
But it was a great band, and it was an idea. After Dire Straits finished, I came to Italy to see a friend of mine at Sony Music in Milan. And he said, "It's about time you made a solo album." I thought, no, I'm not the sort of person to do a solo album. He said, "Well, what do you want to do?" And we came up with an idea over dinner. And he said, "Just think of a bunch of people you'd like to work with, and we'll put a project together around it." And that became that project called Spin 1 2. It was a bunch of covers, but it was covers that everybody in the band wanted to do. You know, I think we all came from similar roots. You know, a bit of Led Zeppelin and a bit of some nice tunes and nice meaty rock songs. And we did it in a week. And a lot of the recording was live. We didn't do overdubs and things like that. Paul was singing and playing Hammond live, and you know, there was very little problem with separation. You know, it didn't matter basically. So we just all got on with it and had a fabulous time. And as I say, we did the whole album in a week.
Wow.
And,
Is that available? Is that on?
It should be. It became a bit of a cult album. I mean, it's 95, 96. So it's a while back now. And it's probably still available. And it's called Spin 1 2. And there's some great tracks on it.
Okay. Hey, Bill is asking if there was a moment of musical genius that you can recall happening in the studio that you witnessed or even played that has a fun backstory.
One of the first sessions I remember doing, it must have been in about 78, was I got a call. This is how young I was. I was still living with my parents. I was back living with my parents after the initial problem I had with my dad. And there was a phone call at 4 o'clock in the morning. And my mum got to the phone before I did. And she came upstairs and knocked on my door very quietly so as not to wake my dad. And she said, "Philip, there's a Mr. Bowie on the phone for you." And I went down, and it was David Bowie calling from Berlin, I think it was. And he says, "I'm putting some tracks together for Iggy Pop. And I was just wondering if you could come over and play on it." And I thought, yeah, I'll be there. So I got myself a flight and I packed up the Nocaster. I took that, and I ended up in Munich working on that album. And there was a chemistry between David Bowie and Iggy Pop, which was really kind of explosive, should we say. They would kind of wind each other up and have this kind of aggressive exchanges about directions of music and sounds and stuff like that. And I think that was the nearest I ever came to seeing that true genius at work. Because the tracks that came out of that were quite remarkable. That album was called The Idiot. It was an Iggy Pop album called The Idiot, and there was some great tracks on it. The first version of China Girl was on there. Before Bowie recorded it himself, and a song called Night Clubbing, which was went on to be recorded by lots of other people, and some other really classic tunes. And it was a pretty weird and wonderful experience for me because it was just me playing on these sketches of songs, because there wasn't a rhythm section on them as such. There were early stages of the production, and there was some unrecognizable kind of sounds going on that they'd obviously been fiddling around with, and a drum machine or something, or sometimes just a click. And it was an interesting experience for a young boy like me to be thrown into a situation like that with this electricity around me. I thought that was a really interesting session.
Yeah, Iggy Pop is definitely known for wild experimentations too with sounds. It's like it must have been very electric to watch, that energy. There's a question here. I'm going to tie a question I have with a question one of our guests, one of our attendees has, and that is, what guitar do you go to today? Whether it's acoustic or electric, what's your favorite? And then now that you're recording, there's obviously been a huge change in technology to the days of your uncle wiring and soldering and inventing the preamp. We have a lot of studio sessions are now just playing through plugins, that actually are emulators of classic old, whether a Neve preamp or you name it. There's or any like that AC30. You probably don't even need that. You could plug it in. But how do you feel like that? Are you using, what's your guitar of choice, and what do you feel about plugins versus the real analog sound there?
Okay, let's start with the guitar, because I exclusively use Strats these days. The old Nocaster is in storage somewhere safe because it became so valuable that I couldn't take it out anymore.
Museum piece, yeah.
It really is. And then working with Eric, they started to supply me with these nice Eric Clapton Strats, which I have 4 of. I've got a black one, a red one, a pewter and a green one, which they made specifically for me. And they've all got these things called lace sensor pickups. And I really enjoy what those pickups do to the Stratocaster. They give it a fatter, richer sound than early Stratocasters. So that is my guitar of choice. I've got one in London, I've got one here in Rome, I've got one in Paris where I do a lot of work, and they kind of stay there, and I go and visit them from time to time.
Your friends.
Yeah. And the green one is here with me. The green one is, you probably saw already on the Dire Straits video.
Yep.
That one is a one-off. They said, okay, we're going to make you a Stratocaster. What colour do you want? I said, British Racing Green with gold hardware, and that's what they made me. So I think it's probably the only one of that colour in existence. And that's here. It's in my cupboard right here, and that's one of the guitars I use most of the time. Regarding amplifiers, I've gone through. I'm not a big fan of plugins. A bit of purist when it comes to amplifiers and valves. The sound of a valve in an amplifier it's unbeatable for me. No matter who tries to emulate it, it's never quite the same. And there's a thing called a Kemper. I don't know if you've heard of those.
No, what's it called?
A Kemper, which is it's a digital amplifier with no valves and no moving parts. Basically, has 10,000 different sounds, and they're all horrible. Sorry, Kemper, but I don't like the concept. There's something missing from the sound of. I don't get the sound of my hand anymore through a device like that. It sounds like it's not me. And there's a very, very small delay while during the processing of this.
Yep, the latency. Yeah,
it's tiny. It's tiny. I don't know, what is it? 6 milliseconds or something stupid, but it affects the way I play, and it makes me feel uncomfortable. So I'm not a big fan. I've got a guy that makes me amplifiers who lives in Italy. It's called a Dream Maker, and it's based upon. I said, make me an amplifier like the old matchless valve amplifier. And he said, he went away and he found the wiring diagram and built me this amplifier. And I absolutely love it. And it's what I use all the time now. And it's got two knobs. It's got two knobs on the front, volume and tone. And that's enough.
That's all you need. I love it. Hey, I know you've got the acoustic behind you, and you had prepared a little thing you were going to play. Do you want to play a little bit?
What was I going to play?
I don't know. When we were in the green room, you gave me a sound check, and it was I don't know, or maybe something else.
Okay, this is a Maton. There's a mate in Australia, and they are my favourite acoustic guitars at the moment. It's just a small one, just for the lounge. Mm-hmm. It's a lovely little thing, and it's what I do all my writing on these days. And
sounds great.
Did you hear that? Okay.
Yes, perfect. It was, yeah.
That's a song that we put together for my band, which is called Dire Straits Legacy. And in fact, we made an album that we called Legacy. Mm-hmm. And there's the title track called 3-Chord Trick.
3-Chord Trick.
Yeah. And that might be worth some of your guys having a look at, because it's a good little tune.
3-Chord Trick.
Yeah. And we did it, we recorded it at Steve Ferrone's house in Los Angeles. And Pino Palladino popped in and played the bass on it. And we had a few weeks of heaven, really. Just those two. It's hard to explain how good they are together. But I think Pino is undoubtedly, in my opinion, the best bass player on the planet. And Steve Ferroni is probably the greatest rock and roll drummer I've worked with ever. So it was a joy.
Wow, that sounds does sound like bliss. Hey, I have another. Karen's got a question, and I'll pose the question, and then we're going to watch the video, and you can come back and answer that. And she's with that last selection of videos that we looked at, or performances. What emotions do you experience when you look back on the footage? So with that in your back of your mind, let me play you and play everybody this one. I'm turning my mic off, and let's see if I remember.
Y'all sing it with me. Here we go. One for the money, two for the show. But don't ever waste it.
Ah. Now, before you answer that question, I just want to mention this Johnny Halliday. What a voice. And until I saw that clip with you, I'd never heard of him. And for those here in the USA, he is probably responsible for bringing rock and roll to France. I mean, he's like him and Serge Gainsborough. I mean, I've heard of Serge, but I never heard of this guy. And oh my God, I can't imagine. And plus being on stage with a guy just puffing on a cigarette and he still has that voice. Oh my God.
Yeah, he was special, Johnny. I mean, he was the French Elvis, really. Must have been probably in the early 60s, or even late 50s, I'm not sure. But he was always there. He was huge in France. And he could sell out the football stadium 6-8 times consecutively, easily. And did every year. And he decided to do an album in English. I think it was a weird decision for him. I guess he wanted to break out of France, but it wasn't very successful. It wasn't very good, and he was a strange guy. He was a kind of lost soul in many ways. He used to drink excessively and smoke excessively, and he was actually quite unpleasant to be around. But honestly, a huge and very successful French artist. In fact, he was Belgian, just to put the record straight, but he was, yeah. But the French loved him, and he became an icon. They used to call him l'idole, the idol.
The idol. Yeah, he just died a few years ago and of lung cancer, of all things, yeah.
It was predictable, really. I mean, it's unbelievable. His lifestyle was shocking.
So coming back to Karen, what emotions do you get while looking back at that footage? What do you see? I mean, both clips.
Honestly, some of those bits I had never seen before. The bit with Johnny Halliday, I'd completely forgotten about. It's the first time I'd probably ever seen that.
Ah, cool.
So it was an interesting moment for me. I was dreading to see what I did next. Because, sometimes you get it wrong. And I don't think I did. I got away with it, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. I love it. So, different guitarists and different musicians, some have very large egos. Some are pretty humble. You've worked with everybody. And I was in preparing for today's webcast, I ran across a story about a time you were, I don't know what the session was, but you had an opportunity to either watch or be in a session with Joe Walsh. And I'd love for you to share that story because I think it's wonderful.
Joe Walsh, yeah, we did. He was on the Strat Pack thing that you mentioned earlier. And I'd always been a massive fan of his right through the James Gang.
Yeah.
All his early stuff. I thought, there were some classic things, Funk 49 and great tracks like that. And it was a joy to work with him. But he did something which was a big lesson for me about that time. He showed up, we didn't rehearse really, not with him anyway, he wasn't around, so we rehearsed the basic shape of the tunes without him. And so we were ready when he did show up. And he showed up on the day of the gig, and he had someone find an amp for him and a guitar, which he didn't bring. And he found a Stratocaster that he'd never played before and an amp that he'd never played through before, fiddled with the amps for the controls on the amp for a minute, started playing, and he sounded exactly like Joe Walsh. And I thought, that's a really clever thing to be able to do. And it showed me that it doesn't matter, basically, what you're playing through. If you've got the technique and you've got the right attitude, you can make everything work. And that was a big lesson for me, because during that decade, traveling with equipment around Europe became much more difficult after 9/11, basically.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't take guitars on aeroplanes, or and you could never guarantee what amp you were going to walk into, and so I use that, and I still do, and I enjoy the challenge of walking into a situation cold, plugging a guitar into an amplifier and being me. And that's a good lesson, I think, for anybody. It's about your own characteristics, which you have to bring with you, which you do bring with you. You can't help it. So it doesn't really matter what you're playing through, as long as you shine through, basically.
Yeah, as long as you shine through. Amen to that. And I know that as a session musician, I can imagine that producers or other bands that you work with, they come in and say, okay, I want you to be, and I don't know if they do this, I'm just pulling something out. You know, I want a Jimi Hendrix thing, or I really like a Chet Atkins sound here. And the best of the best, of course, can mimic anybody. But what I think differentiates, and I think from what I've listened to and heard, is you're sometimes not asked to come in and be somebody else, but actually to be you. Tell us about that.
That's a good moment to get to, and it was for me in my career. Initially, when you started doing sessions back in the 70s, that would be the brief would be, can you do a solo like Eric Clapton, or can you do a solo like Jimi Hendrix, or can you sound like this, and then there's a sort of milestone moment where you walk into a session and someone asks you to be you, and that's where things start to change, and you're not asked to play like someone else anymore, and you have an identity of your own. That's an important moment for any musician.
A big leap, yeah. And there's so many people that have not so many. It's actually more rare that people have that unique sound where you can just say, "Oh, okay, that's Mark. I know that," you know, or you know, that is, you know, name your guy. That's Eric. You know, JJ Cale. Yeah. So I'm curious, what in this career that has spanned a half a century, what are you most proud of, Phil?
That's a tough one. I guess surviving, really. I think I'm quite proud of that, because it's, you know, there's a lot of things that can go wrong, you know, in a career like this, rock and roll generally. You know, either through abuse or you know, not looking after yourself, or believing all the nonsense that you get, things get thrown at you, and, you know, believing your hype. I don't know. Yeah, surviving. I suppose it's a bit like getting a medal for something you did, and moving on to the next thing, and then earning another medal. Oh God, we lost the picture again.
Uh-oh.
Can you still hear me?
I can hear you, yep.
Okay, I'll keep rabbiting on until it comes back. Yeah, that surviving is probably the thing I'm most proud of. The things I'm doing these days, I'm able to use all of the things that I've learned over the last 50 years in one sort of thing. So I play the guitar, I do the arrangements, I write the songs, I produce the songs, and all of that is a culmination of 50 years in the music business, basically.
You also, you know, I'm curious about what got you to Italy, and part of it, I think, or what got you to, what made you stay, and I know part of that, maybe there's more to that, but I'm going to share a photograph here, because you're also collaborating with your wife, and yes. There she is, and so since your picture's coming back, but tell us about what got you to Italy, and about Pneuma, and about Promised Land, and the work you're doing with charities, because I think it's pretty impressive.
Something happened during the 80s when the session circuit was going nuts in England, in London specifically. A lot of artists from Europe started to understand that some good music was being made by the session players in London, and started to come and do their albums in London. And one of the first of these was a chap called Lucio Battisti. And can you still hear me?
Yep, you're here. Okay. We lost your feed again, so I'm gonna leave. I'm leaving you and Numa up there. Here, I'll go this one.
Okay, yeah, that's nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, Lucio Battisti, and we recorded an album in London for him, and I completely forgot about it. There was one track on it where it was an experimental end section, coda section, and I played a solo over the end changes, which lasted over 2 minutes, and expecting it to be edited or faded out or something. But it turned out that they reproduced, when the album came out, they kept everything. And there's this great big long solo on the end of this track called Con il Nastro Rosa, which became, in 1980, became the summer hit in Italy. And it stayed at the top of the charts for months, this song. And I didn't know anything about it. I was, oblivious to all this stuff going on in Italy. And it wasn't until 1990, when I came over to do something else, that I was on my way from the airport and it came on the radio, and I thought, that sounds familiar. And it was that same song, and they'd kept all of this long coda, and it had become a kind of national anthem in Italy, this song. And even to this day, they teach that guitar solo in the conservatories here, the music schools. They teach young potential guitar players my solo. And unknowingly, I'd become a bit of a celebrity here. And when I started spending more time here and working with other Italian artists, that thing always came up. And I started working a lot here, and met my now wife. I was married to someone else for 30 years, and I kind of fell in love with the lifestyle in Italy, in Rome, and Emanuela, who I later married, and now I live here permanently. Well, not permanently, but when I'm not running around the planet, I live here.
Yeah. So, a couple more questions. Then I know it's late for you back there, so I'm going to let you go. But Brian is asking if you ever, your thoughts about Eddie Van Halen, since we recently lost him, and if you ever ran into him in the studio or on the road.
Never did, but he kind of revolutionized guitar playing for a while there. I mean, the stuff that he did for, was it Beat It? He was on, wasn't it? Michael Jackson.
Oh, yeah.
It was a blistering kind of technique, and he became the sort of competition for quite a while. And I started to fiddle around with the tapping business. I thought, that's really not for me. And I suppose one of my favourite things to remember when I'm playing is that, for me, music is the space in between the notes. Someone else very famous said that a long, long time ago. A French composer whose name escapes me for the moment. But for me, that's really important. I'd much rather find a phrase or a series of notes which flow and mean something than the wonderful stuff that Eddie Van Halen was able to do. It was a thing on its own. It was a marvelous achievement to do that. But for me, the music is the space in between the notes.
Yeah, that brings me up. I already mentioned one, but two of my most, I guess, guitarists that probably speak to the space between the notes would be Dave Gilmour, because
undoubtedly,
yeah, it's not about shredding. It's not, as you say, quite a stylistically different. And I mentioned JJ Cale, who of course inspired Eric quite a bit, and had that same space between the notes. I think as well. You played with somebody and who's a huge fan, and I know one of our guests here is also a huge fan. So it'd be a remiss of not asking about some of your experience. What did you do with Bob Dylan? And Mark, of course, worked with him for a couple albums. I think produced 2 of them, or at least one. But
I feel a bit of a fraud when people say that I worked with Bob Dylan. I did. I shared the stage with him, but only on one occasion.
Okay.
And it was for a thing called the Great Music Experience, which happened somewhere in Japan in early 2000s. And it was one of those things where they tried to combine influences from all around the world into one kind of musical event. And it was fun, but honestly, I played I think four songs with Bob Dylan, and there was a sort of there was a thing at the end where everyone got on the stage, about 80 people, and sang something of Bob's. But the highlight of that gig for me wasn't Bob Dylan; it was in fact Joni Mitchell, and it was a time where I met her for the first time, and. I have a fabulous memory. Me actually and Pino Palladino together, we were set aside into a little rehearsal room with just the 3 of us, me, Joni Mitchell, and Pino, and to rehearse her songs for the night. And both Pino and I looked at each other with this look on our face and think, there's this amazing noise coming out of this little person. And hardened session players, I was wilting. It was just so good, so beautiful what she did. Both of us really, we didn't want to play because in case it interrupted with what she was doing. But that was the highlight of musically probably my whole life.
Wow, it's interesting you mentioned Joni Mitchell. Just a friend of mine from the middle of the country sent me on Saturday an interview with Joni Mitchell. It's probably 3 or 4 years old, with Gian Gomeshi, the Canadian. I guess now he's the not so. He had a couple little problems in the media, but it was a really good interview, and she was just, she didn't sing. They played a couple old clips, but she is very spiritual. She is very in another planet. She doesn't see herself as a musician or a singer. She sees herself as a writer and as an artist first. And she has all this art in her house there in British Columbia. And so it's funny because I never knew that side of Joni other than the music, and got to see that you bring that up. It's kind of crazy.
I mean, she's just a stunning artist. I think one of the best artists I've ever worked with.
Okay, so I guess before I let you go, the last question is: who you played with everyone, but who is somebody you never had a chance to, or maybe is either with us or is not with us anymore? Who would you like to or would have liked to have worked with?
Has to be Donald Fagen, I'm afraid. Steely Dan were a big part of my my apprenticeship in music, and I love what Donald Fagen does. If I ever get the chance to work with him, I would love to.
Wow.
I spent a bit of time just trying to put together one of his pieces so that I could play it. And it's not built for the guitar, but it's a fascinating thing to get the fingers around. So I'll just play a bit of it before we go.
Awesome.
there's more. But
I love that. That's
it's so much fun to play, and there's a lot of Chet Atkins in there, but it's a guitar version of something that's really written on a Fender Rhodes, so it's not an easy thing to play.
wow. Yeah. Well, you made it look easy. I wouldn't even attempt that. I would simply play the closed chords, but I'd probably play them, in the bar, the bar chords. But yeah, well, good. That's a treat.
So let me just say a couple of things.
Yes.
To advert myself. I've just been reminded by my wife, by Numa, that I should say that on my website there's an invitation, like I mentioned before, to do a one-to-one with me, and you just got to go to the website and follow the instructions. And if anybody wants to have a lesson or just to talk, I'm very happy to do it. And also nearing the end of writing a book. It's got some of the stories that we've been talking about today are in it, and it's going to be called Session Man. And it's we're just negotiating the pictures at the moment, so it's nearly done. And I think after Christmas it'll be ready. Again, if people want to sort of keep an eye on the website, they'll probably find out when it comes.
Yeah. Now, if you click in the sidebar, there's a thing said offers. It's really not an offer. It's the easiest way for me to put a link, and you can go and visit philpalmer.com. It's there right now. Check out his website. He has this one-to-one, and if you're interested in learning more or just having a chat, like you said, look at the one-to-one tab on the link on the website, and you can send Phil a note and have an opportunity to, learn. How good is that from a guy with a half a century worth of experience? I'll repeat the stats again because it's off the charts. It's 5,000 songs, 500 albums, and more than 15 number one hit singles this dude has played on. And you've seen some stuff today during the webcast. You can see his techniques. He is versatile. And the thing that I will walk away with today, Phil, thank you, is the music, the spaces. Give me that again, because that is, I know it was someone else, but
music is the space between the notes.
Music is the space between the notes. And without knowing that phrase or hearing that, some of my favorite work, guitar work, exudes that philosophy for sure. Huh. Well, any last words of wisdom for our and some people may be watching this on the YouTube replay. So I want to repeat that again. It's philpalmer.com. One-to-one is the links you want to look at. While you're at it, down there's a button, subscribe to my YouTube channel, because we will keep bringing you great guests like this, as well as footage of my travels all over the world. Words of wisdom, Phil?
Practice. You got to practice every day. I mean, if you want to play sessions, you want to be confident on stage. It's all about being relaxed, and the only way to get relaxed is to know what you're doing. It sounds like common sense, but it's one of the things I learned from when I started working with Eric. Is he said I play my best when I'm relaxed, and in the Albert Hall, I feel like I'm in my own home because I played here so much, and I play great here because I'm relaxed.
Yeah, and that going back to the last one of the earlier clips, actually, with the Roger Daltrey, that was Carnegie Hall on top of that, wasn't that? Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
So Royal Albert Hall, Carnegie. Yeah. You have definitely been around. Wow. Well, if there's another great British actor, and as my brain fog comes, and I can't believe I think his name because everybody knows him. But he would say, coming back to your thing on practice, he would say that practice or rehearsal is the work, performance is the play. and I think it becomes to what you say that and I'm just going to cheat because I'm not going to ask you, okay, to this actor, you know him, Anthony Hopkins.
Okay.
Yeah. Or maybe Tony, as his friends call him. I don't know. I'm not that close to him, but that's from him. Because it's practice. It's not in everything you do, and for him, that acting is there, and then when you're on the stage,
when you see him in a movie, you know, he's not acting. He's just doing it, isn't he? He's just being him.
Yeah.
You got to be yourself. That's the key for me. And I go up on the stage. I'm not trying to be someone else. I'm trying to be me. And I know how to do me now.
you do. I'm going to play a quick ending little video. We'll come back and say goodbye, and then I'm going to. I want to thank you and thank everybody, all of our attendees who've been on for participating. But here we got the little closer. Thank you for tuning in to the Journeys Webcast. I'm Allan Karl, your host. Be sure to tune us in every Monday. The time changes depending on where we are in the world. This is Allan Karl, and where will your next journey take you?
Cool.
Phil, this has been super lot of fun. Great stories. I wish we were in different times. I would love to ride my motorcycle to Rome and have a tea with you and share this conversation across the table as opposed to across the internet. But maybe one day.
Yeah, man. Thanks
okay.
a lot. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks for
having me too. Thank you. Sleep well. And thank Numa too.
Okay. Take
Ciao.
care, man.